Welcome back, everybody, to this week's edition of the Spread Option here on the CFB Nation podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Trowbridge. Normally, Vince D'Addario is with me, but right now he's nursing back to health, and we wish him nothing but the best and a speedy recovery. So you guys just have to listen to me for about the next half an hour to 45 minutes. But we have another awesome show coming your way, guys. And listen, it was an awesome week of college football coming up. We are actually going to preview 5 different games today, because this weekend is going to be fun. Should be a lot of fun. But you guys know how we always start. We're talking hit or miss. We're reviewing last week, seeing how we did on player props, locks of the week, and dogs of the week. And then, as always, we're doing the countdown. Like I said, we're picking 5 games, talking big 3, 2 player props, 1 keep away. And as always, we still have locks, drops, and our dogs of the week. Vince was awesome enough to make sure that he sent in his picks. There he is, our guy in the chat, Vince D'Addario. I know he wouldn't miss this one for the world, so shout out to Vince. He's listening. I'll make sure that I do your picks justice, man. But going through hit or miss, the first game that we covered last week, the Texas Tech Red Raiders on the road against the Utah Utes. We picked 2 different player props in this game. Terrence Carter, the tight end for Texas Tech, his over-under was set at 34.5 receiving yards. We said to take the over, which would have hit. He ended the game with 49 receiving yards. Sticking on the same line of Texas Tech, Cameron Dickey, their running back, anytime touchdown. I believe he had scored in every game up to that point. That one would have hit as well. And if you were feeling a little gutsy and you wanted to do him for 2 anytime touchdowns, that would have hit as well. He ended the afternoon with 2. Moving down onto the SEC, and I know it's weird to talk about Oklahoma still being in the SEC, but one of the games that we talked about was the Auburn Tigers on the road in Norman against Oklahoma. This was the top 25 matchup. And we were relying on the quarterbacks in this one to put on a show. We went 50-50, folks. Sometimes it's just the life of a bettor. You never know how it turns out. But we talked about quarterback Jackson Arnold for Auburn. 2 dual-threat quarterbacks going out between Jackson Arnold for Auburn and John Mateer from Oklahoma. We talked about taking them for an anytime touchdown. Unfortunately, Jackson Arnold was not able to come through for us. His anytime touchdown prop missed. But fortunately, John Mateer, I believe it was later in the game, too. John Mateer ran in a rushing touchdown, helped seal the game for the Sooners to knock off Auburn at home. Next game that we talked about was the Purdue Boilermakers traveling to South Bend, Indiana to take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Unfortunately, the Notre Dame player prop that we talked about in this one, Eli Raridan, tight end for Notre Dame, his over-under was set at 44.5 receiving yards, and it missed. And I wish I could lie to you guys and say that we missed kind of close. It missed kind of by a lot. His over-under was set at 44.5 receiving yards. We missed that one by 44.5 receiving yards. Unfortunately, he didn't get a single target in that game. Didn't stop Notre Dame from advancing on and beating Purdue 56-30. Now, one bright spot for Purdue, and I was shocked that the quarterback for Purdue, Ryan Brown, his over-under was set at 167.5 passing yards. That hit. He ended the game with 250 yards. And I'll do you one better. And I understand that Notre Dame handled business in this one. First quarter wasn't so great. That over would have hit in the first half. I believe he went into halftime with a little bit over 220 passing yards, maybe a hair under. Regardless, it would have blown that 167.5 passing yards out of the water. Now, I know come game time, I think his over-under for passing yards got bumped up to 192.5. Doesn't matter. It still hit. He finished the afternoon with 250 passing yards. Moving on to Illinois at Indiana. A little action in the Big Ten at night under the lights in Bloomington. This one was surprising. We thought that Indiana was going to win this game. I know we talked about it last week. It was time for Illinois and Brett Bielema to show if they were really that team and taking the next step into the next tier of the Big Ten. Unfortunately for them, they didn't. They got blown out of the water. They lost 63-10. We said for Luke Altmaier, his over-under was set at 1.5 passing touchdowns. He had 2 passing touchdowns, I believe, in every game leading up to his battle with the Hoosiers, and that fell short. He ended with just 1 passing touchdown. However, quarterback Fernando Mendoza, I think, has a go-to target in that offense. Argument could be made with multiple because he also has Elijah Surratt. We said to take Omar Cooper's over in receiving yards. It was set at 54.5, and he ended the night with 78. Now, I got to tell you, that was a game that I was not expecting to see coming from jump. Indiana jumped on the Fighting Illini, and unfortunately for our Illinois fans out there and my guy Sean Davis, there wasn't a whole lot of fighting for the Illini after they got down in a major deficit. But they're going to look to bounce back this week against USC, I believe. They're at home. Let's see how USC travels out east and see how they fare when they take on Illinois. It's another top 25 matchup in the Big Ten. Getting into our locks of the week. Now, if you guys remember, last week was pretty rough for our locks and dogs of the week. But my lock of the week, Miami minus 7.5 against Florida, and that ended up hitting. Miami went on to win that game 26-7, and right now I got to tell you, man, Florida is struggling. They're really struggling to gain momentum. I really hope for the best for Billy Napier. After watching the Any Given Saturday documentary, I do like Billy Napier. You know, the story about DJ Lagway was cool. He was going back and forth last year with Graham Mertz for who was going to start, and it just never really panned out for Graham Mertz. He ended up getting hurt. DJ Lagway stepped in, but he's had a rough season so far this year. So is Florida. Hopefully they're going to look to bounce back this upcoming weekend. But my lock of the week hit, getting to Vince's. And unfortunately for Vince, he picked Nebraska plus 1.5 on the road, or at home, against Michigan. This game was actually kind of a crazy shootout. I think it was 17-17 at halftime. I know it was tied up heading into the half. Unfortunately, Nebraska couldn't get it done. They lost at home. Michigan won 30-27 to the dismay of Vince. I know that he was really pulling for the Cornhuskers in this one, despite how much I know he loves the Michigan Wolverines. But I also missed on Nebraska in just a separate bet of my own. That was pretty unfortunate. Now, getting into our dogs of the week. My dog of the week was Syracuse, and I went back to the orange. You know, I picked them to cover their spread in week 1 against Tennessee. That didn't even come close to hitting. I thought, you know what? Steve Angeli's got a couple of games under his belt. The Syracuse offense is kind of humming right now, and Clemson just hasn't been the team that we thought. Their line was set at 17.5 on the road against Clemson. That hit in a big way. Syracuse ended up winning. And I hate to say it for the Clemson Tigers and Dabo Swinney, but they're done. You know, I'll say this, prayers out to former Notre Dame quarterback Steve Angeli for his speedy recovery. He ended up tearing his Achilles. He had surgery on it. Now, it did happen early enough in the season where hopefully he's going to be able to redshirt, take a medical redshirt, so he'll have 2 years of eligibility left at Syracuse, because now he's put on full display what he's able to do. But honestly, shout out to Steve for his last game in the 2025 season before he got hurt was a huge upset win on the road against Clemson. And now the moment you all have been waiting for. I know that Vince, coming into this week, was undefeated. And we talked last week that if he was ever going to miss on a dog of the week, it would be last week, because he picked Purdue to cover their 25.5-point spread on the road against Notre Dame, and it missed by a point. Purdue lost by 26 points on the nose. But like we said last week, Vince, I know you were in the chat. If there was going to be one for you to miss out on, at least it was at the hands of Notre Dame getting a big win. Something that hopefully is going to help turn their season around. We'll see how much, because it was Purdue, but who knows? But Vince, unfortunately, his win streak is over, but it was impressive nonetheless. Real quick before we dive into the countdown here, folks, the record, okay, overall record so far, player props, we are now 21-14. Going into last week, we were 16-11. So we're still keeping an improvement here. We're about two player props better than where we were at last week, hoping to keep that momentum up this week. We'll see. It was just me this week. And now I know Vince is going to get off scot-free. If the player props take a dive, that's going to be 100% on me. For locks of the week, I'm up. I got one in the win column last week. I am now 2-3 on the season in locks of the week. Vince, unfortunately, he's down one from last week. He's 1-4. Dogs of the week, I'm up one from last week. I've finally broken above 500, and I'm now 3-2 on the season. And like we talked about, Vince, unfortunately, is now 4-1. Picked up his first miss, but like we talked about before, that's okay, because at the end of the day, Notre Dame still got the dub by 26 points. So, like you said, we're in, baby. We're in, starting a new win streak. There we go. I love it. I absolutely love it. All right. Part 2 of today's show here on the countdown. The spread option. We're getting into the countdown. We have 5 games coming your way for this week. First game, noon kickoff on ABC. Number 22 Notre Dame is on the road against the Arkansas Razorbacks, who are 2-2 on the season. Now, this is the first meeting in program history between these two. And I, for one, obviously, for obvious reasons, am very excited to watch this game go down. Now, the big three, Spread, Notre Dame is favored by 4.5 points. And then obviously money line for them. It's minus 194 to take Notre Dame money line right now. That's a little interesting. And then the over-under, I'm not going to get too much into right now, but the over-under is set at 63.5. And if any of you guys have been keeping track of Notre Dame's season so far, you're not shocked that the over-under is set at 63.5. Let's dive into some player props. The first player prop that we're going to go over, CJ Carr. His over-under for passing yards is set at 244.5. I'm taking the over on this one. This game has all the makings of a shootout. And he went for 293 passing yards in their last shootout in South Bend against Texas A&M. On the flip side of the coin, Arkansas has the number 74 ranked pass defense in the country. And they've definitely allowed opposing quarterbacks to chunk them to death, I guess you could say. I like CJ Carr. I like this passing offense with Malachi Fields. I think Jeremiah Love is going to get a good amount of receiving yards this year or in this matchup because I don't think Arkansas's linebackers are really built to cover a guy like Jeremiah Love out of the backfield. And then hopefully, this is a game that we see Jaden Greathouse emerge because I think they can take advantage of him against a linebacker, a nickel corner, or a safety. Second player prop that we're going to talk about, Jadarian Price anytime touchdown. The fact that the odds for this one is minus 135 is actually crazy. I think at some point Vegas will learn a little bit. Jadarian Price has 6 touchdowns in his last 2 games. That's one that I cannot believe that his just one anytime touchdown is minus 135. Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love have been on an absolute tear between Texas A&M and Purdue. They have 446 total yards of offense. And that doesn't include their 100-yard kick return. They've also combined for 10 touchdowns in the last 2 games. So the other player prop that I'm going with, I'm riding with Jadarian Price, anytime touchdown. I was almost tempted to take that as my lock of the week because of how well he's been playing the last couple of games, but stayed away from it, went a different route. My one keep away, and yes, I just got done talking about how good the Notre Dame running back room has been. But my one keep away, Jeremiah Love's over-under rushing yards is set at 97.5. I obviously, for good reason, I cannot take the under, but I'm also not comfortable taking the over in this one. Let me say this. He is more than capable of getting 100 rushing yards in this game. But I think a lot of people put a lot of weight into Arkansas's performance against Memphis, who had a mobile quarterback. Notre Dame doesn't have that right now. Arkansas held Ole Miss to 118 rushing yards on 40 attempts as a team. Yes, like I said, I understand what they did against Memphis. It just makes me uncomfortable betting for Jeremiah Love to go over 97.5 in a game like this on the road. I have to imagine that Travis Williams, the defensive coordinator for Arkansas, is keeping an eye on what Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price have done the last couple of weeks and has to know that number 4 can't beat them. But sometimes when a player is just that good, you can't. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if the over hit on this one. I'm just staying away from it. Game number 2 that we're talking about. The number 4 LSU Tigers on the road against the number 13 Ole Miss Rebels. Big 3. Ole Miss is favored by 1.5, and the over-under for this game is set at 56.5. Look, this is just a straight-up pick'em game. Straight-up pick'em game. I think the odds are both minus. I think it's minus 118 for Ole Miss money line and minus 108 for LSU money line. It's up in the air. And I could see this game going either way, which may or may not, hint, hint, go into my one keep away for this week. But for the 2 player props, and honestly, a pretty sweet name for a quarterback. First player prop, Ole Miss's quarterback, their starting quarterback, Austin Simmons, has been ruled out for this game. So they're going with backup quarterback Trinidad Chambliss in this one. I like his over in rushing yards. His over-under is set at 52.5 rushing yards. Chambliss has 174 rushing yards in his last 2 games against Arkansas and Tulane. Now, LSU's defense is better than Arkansas's defense and Tulane's defense. I'm very well aware of that fact. But Ole Miss playing at home, Trinidad is a dual-threat quarterback, and we have yet to see this LSU defense be able to stop a true mobile quarterback. I know it's a new season. It's year 2 of their defensive coordinator that they hired last year, but LSU historically has not been able to stop mobile quarterbacks going back to last year. And unfortunately for them, that task isn't going to get much easier as the season progresses. But I like Trinidad Chambliss over 52.5 rushing yards in this one. The second player prop, and I know we don't do this a whole lot. I actually don't know if we've done it yet this season, but I'm going to take a player's under here. Garrett Nussmeier's passing yard line is set at 286.5. And I'm going to take the under on this one. He has yet to surpass that number this season. The closest he's been is he passed for 273 yards against Southeast Louisiana, I believe, last week. Ole Miss's defense isn't anything to write home about. It's definitely not the defense from last year, but this is also not the LSU offense that we thought that we were going to see. So I'm taking the under for Garrett Nussmeier's passing yards at 286.5. And then my one keep away, folks, we talked about it. I'm staying away from the big three. This is a straight up pick 'em game and one that I could see swinging either way. LSU's offense has yet to take off. Is this the game that they do that? Maybe. Ole Miss doesn't have that same defense, and they still have a good offense, but LSU's defense hasn't really been tested yet. And yes, I know the counter to that is, well, they've played Clemson already. Well, I just watched Clemson losing back-to-back games to Georgia Tech and to Syracuse. I'm not really too bought in on Clemson's offense being a good benchmark for talking about how good LSU's offense is yet. So I'm staying away from the big three in this game. I understand why the over-under in this one is 56.5. The last two times these teams have faced off, it's been an absolute barn burner. Just think it's a little bit different going into this matchup. Third game that we're talking about, the number 1 Ohio State Buckeyes on the road against undefeated Washington. Now, this matchup is extremely interesting. Ohio State started off the season knocking off the then number 1 ranked the Texas Longhorns at home, and Washington has yet to lose at home. Last time they lost at home was November of 2021. This game's going to be fun. The big three, Ohio State is favored by 8.5 points. The over-under is set at 52.5. This one's going to be fun, folks. The 2 player props. First one, Damon Williams, the quarterback for Washington. I like his over 40.5 rush yards. So far this season, Williams has rushed for 68, 64, and 88 consecutively in their first 3 games. Now, here's a kicker. He hasn't played anybody. Kind of a big factor, but he's a traditional dual threat quarterback and one that Ohio State will have to account for. When I watch, and I know that sacks count against rushing yards in college for quarterbacks, but after watching Ohio State's defensive line against Texas, it didn't really impress me. Arch Manning had quite a bit of time to throw in the pocket. I don't know how good Washington's offensive line is compared to Texas's offensive line. All I know is that Texas had to replace 4 starters on the offensive line, and then at some point in fall camp, they also lost their right tackle for the season, and Ohio State still wasn't able to generate much pressure. And we just haven't gotten a good sample size out of that after that because they've played Grambling and Ohio. So I'm going to ride with the dual threat quarterback. I like Damon Williams over 40.5 rushing yards. The second player prop, wide receiver from Ohio State. And no, we're not talking about Jeremiah Smith. I'm riding with Carnell Tate anytime touchdown. First and foremost, I love the odds on this one. It's at -105. Tate has scored in every game so far this season. And it's not a secret that Washington's going to try to bracket Jeremiah Smith. He's the best receiver in college football. And so I think Carnell Tate is going to have to step up. We saw him step up and make a big catch in the Texas game. I like him for an anytime touchdown here. I do. And then my one keep away, and if you guys listened to the Irish Breakdown podcast earlier today, I'm staying away from Ohio State rushing props. Right now, you can bet on 3 different Ohio State running backs to score. You can bet on James Peoples, C.J. Donaldson, or Bo Jackson, and all of their over-unders are set under 50 yards. They're a by-committee group, and the last time they played a Power 4 opponent, Ohio State was held to 77 rushing yards as a team. Now, again, I don't know if Washington's rush defense is comparable to Texas. But I never feel comfortable betting on overs for rushing yards when it's by committee as much as it is. But since they're set so low, I also don't feel comfortable taking anybody's under. So I'm staying away from Ohio State rushing props. I think that one could be real, real scary. But with that being said, like I said earlier today, if Ohio State wants to win on the road in this environment, yes, you have Julian Sain. Yes, you have Jeremiah Smith. Yes, you have Carnell Tate. But they're going to have to be able to run the football. One of those 3 running backs are going to have to step up. But I'm staying away from it because I don't know which one that's going to be. The fourth game, we're staying in the Big Ten. Number 6 Oregon on the road against number 3 Penn State. I know you guys have heard about this one already. It's the annual whiteout game. It's a night game in Happy Valley inside of Beaver Stadium, which is cause for Penn State to be favored by 3.5 points. The over-under for this one is set at 52.5. Now, this game is really interesting because neither team has really played anybody. And I think that's where a lot of the uncertainty comes with this one. Penn State has started their season. They've played FIU, Nevada, and Villanova. It's really bad. But it's not like Oregon has played anybody that much better. Now, where they have the leg up is Oregon has since played a Power 4 opponent. So far this season, Oregon has played Montana State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, and Oregon State. So I think it was Brian earlier in the show today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. He said that Oregon's schedule looks like a gauntlet compared to what Penn State has faced so far this year. And I'm in full agreement there. But now this is a really big test. Each team is jumping up multiple levels in the level of competition that they're facing, which made this one a little bit harder to break down. But here's the 2 player props that I'm going with in this one. First one, running back for Penn State, Kaytron Allen, anytime touchdown. Odds right now are set at -125. He scored a rushing touchdown in every game so far this season. And I'm also still not sold on Oregon's run defense. Lost a lot of pieces from last year's defense. And I believe Kaytron Allen, let me look this up. I believe Kaytron Allen scored multiple touchdowns in the Big Ten championship last year. But it's just one of those where I'm going with my gut here. I think that Kaytron Allen is going to be able to punch it in the end zone a couple of times. Yeah, last year in the Big Ten championship game, Kaytron Allen had a rushing touchdown. He also rushed for $124 in the Big Ten championship down here in Indianapolis. So that is my first player prop. Second player prop, Gary Bryant, wide receiver for Oregon. His over-under receiving yards right now is set at 28.5. In the first game of the season, he had 31. He followed that up with a 46-yard performance. And then in their most recent outing against Oregon State, he had 65 receiving yards. He's also scored a receiving touchdown in all 3 of those games against Montana State, Oklahoma State, and Oregon State. He didn't record a catch against Northwestern. I'll have to do more digging and see if he was out for that game or if he just didn't get targeted. But I like Gary Bryant over 28.5 receiving yards in this one. And then my one keep away, I'm staying away from Dante Moore passing props. This kid has been absolutely lighting the world on fire through the first 4 games. He has 962 passing yards, 11 passing touchdowns, and only 1 interception. That's really, really impressive. He's also played Montana State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, and Oregon State. Penn State at Beaver in a whiteout is a little different. And their only road game so far this year has been on the road against Northwestern. I think Dante Moore is a very capable passer. I really do. And I believe his over-under was set at 224.5. I'll have to double check that. But this is one of the games that I just don't know what to expect from him. I don't. That's not leading into who I believe is going to win this game in totality. But yeah, Dante Moore's over-under passing yards is set at 222.5. On the road against the Jim Knowles defense, that's really, really difficult. I'm staying away from Dante Moore's passing props. Final game that we're talking about. Taking a trip down to the SEC, number 17 Alabama on the road in Athens at nighttime against the number 5 Georgia Bulldogs in a rematch from what was one of the best college football games last season. This one should be another electric matchup. The Big 3, Georgia's favored by 2.5 points. The over-under for this game is also set at 53.5. This is one where I just don't know how to predict this one. You know, on one hand, you have Alabama, who they lost in shocking fashion, 31-17 on the road in week 1 to Florida State. They bounced back, and I think they played Louisiana Monroe, and they won by 70 points. And then they beat the snot out of Wisconsin at home. Wisconsin is not good. Their defense is the best part of that team, but their team as a whole is still garbage. So I don't really know what the real Alabama team is. Then you look at what Georgia's done. They didn't start out the year doing much. And then they have that shootout win in Knoxville over Tennessee. So we know their offense can put up points, but that's not the Kirby Smart defense that we've gotten to know over the years. So this one made it a little difficult. But the 2 player props that I'm going with, first one, my guy Jeremy Bernard over 57.5 receiving yards. He's had at least 62 in all 3 of the games this season. And because of last year's game, I doubt that Georgia's going to let Ryan Williams do what he did to them last season. I'd be shocked if they did. So someone else is going to have to step up. And I think Jeremy Bernard has been their most consistent looking receiver. I couldn't even begin to tell you what happened to Ryan Williams when they played Florida State. Looked like he didn't want to be there. I don't know if it's just because they weren't expecting much out of Florida State because they went 2-10 in 2024. But all I know is the Seminoles jumped all over the Alabama Crimson Tide, and it looked like half the players on that roster wanted nothing to do with it. But this is SEC ball. You're on the road against a conference rival of Georgia, nighttime in Athens. You got to expect somebody to show up. I just don't think Georgia's defense is going to let Ryan Williams run wild. So I have Jeremy Bernard over 57.5 receiving yards. Second player, I'm going with Gunnar Stockton, quarterback of the Dogs. Over 214.5 passing yards. He threw for 204 on the road. 304 on the road against Tennessee. I like what Gunnar Stockton's been able to do. He made some really impressive throws down the stretch of that game against the Vols. And then this Alabama defense, I don't know what to make of them. Wisconsin's offense is terrible. Terrible. And obviously, I'm not putting a whole lot of weight into the Louisiana Monroe game. So I have to go back and look at what they did against Florida State. And Thomas Castellanos threw for 152 yards on this defense on 9 completions in the rain. And Thomas Castellanos is not a thrower. I know Gunnar Stockton isn't a gunslinger, and he's not, he's not Ty Simpson. He's not Dylan Lonergan. He's not CJ Carr. He's not Julian Sain. But I got to imagine that he's going to pass for over 214 yards, especially coming off of that performance against Tennessee. So I like the Georgia quarterback over 214.5 passing yards. One keep away. I'm staying away from Alabama's rushing props. I think, and somebody in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think Jam Miller looks to be making his season debut. He was hurt coming into the season, missed the first 3 games, and I think that he's going to get his first shot this year. But the Crimson Tide hasn't been able to run the ball well against Power 4 opponents. They had 87 team rushing yards against Florida State and 72 team rushing yards against Wisconsin. Now, I understand that was the best part of Wisconsin's team is their defense, probably also their rush defense. But this is Alabama. You got to be able to run the football. I don't like any of their rushing props. I think Jam Miller's was set at a relatively reasonable number, but it's his first game back. And I don't know how much I trust him going over. Let me see here. Right now, his over-under is set at 48.5 yards. Ty Simpson is set at 13.5. And then Kevin Riley, another Alabama running back, is set at 22.5 yards. I don't know if Richard Young isn't playing in this game. I don't know if he's hurt. But I'm staying away from Alabama rushing props until proven otherwise, until I see the Crimson Tide be able to move the ball effectively. I'm on the ground. I'm not touching this one, so I'm staying away from Alabama rushing props. Now we get into the fun part. Locks and drops of the week. Vince was awesome enough to send his over. So like I said, I hope I do it enough justice, and I hope I'm not the reason if I'm the one. I'm a superstitious guy, Vince. So I'm sorry if you don't hit these because I'm the one reading it off. But getting into locks and drops here, my lock of the week, and it pains me to say this, but my lock of the week is over 63.5 in the Notre Dame versus Arkansas game. I hate saying it. I really do. But so far this season, Notre Dame's defense has been Swiss cheese. They gave up, against Texas or against Purdue, there was 86 total points scored. Against Texas A&M, there was 81 total points scored. Both defenses give up a lot of points. Notre Dame ranks 118th in the country in scoring defense. Arkansas ranks number 73 in the country in scoring defense, while both offenses average over 40 points a game. I've been saying it all week, but legitimately, I've been saying it all week. This is an old-fashioned shootout. Hammer the over. Until Notre Dame proves that they can stop people on defense, I'm taking the over in the majority of their games because they have a lot of high-powered offenses coming up on their schedule. They do. They face Arkansas this Saturday. They get Boise State at home on the 4th. They get NC State at home on October 11th, and then they get USC at home on the 18th. So I would look to take the over for the future as well. But for this week specifically, my lock of the week is over 63.5 points, Notre Dame versus Arkansas. Vince's lock of the week is Florida State minus 6.5 at Virginia. Florida State is the number 8 team in the country, and they haven't been tested since their first game of the season against Alabama like we just got done talking about. Virginia's only test was on the road against NC State. They lost by 5, giving up 21 points in the third quarter. Florida State has the top offense in the country, putting up over 600 yards of offense. Vince just thinks it's going to be too much for the Cavaliers. Now, I'll say this. Vince, I like this lock of the week. I do. But I will be very interested to see what Florida State looks like playing another quality opponent. I will. But I like this one. The Seminoles are on the road. His lock of the week is they win by a touchdown. My drop of the week, I'm staying away from the Kentucky-South Carolina game. Who are either of these teams? I couldn't tell you. Right now, Kentucky's 2-1. South Carolina's 2-2. Kentucky looked pretty good against Ole Miss, and I know they lost. They lost to an undefeated team that's currently ranked 16th in the country right now. And then South Carolina's coming off of back-to-back losses against Vanderbilt and Missouri. South Carolina's favored by 5.5 points. I don't trust it. Lenore Sellers hasn't panned out and looked like the quarterback that we thought that he could. Kentucky has been playing significantly more competitive than I thought that they would look this year, but I'm not comfortable. I believe that the spread is at 5.5. I don't feel comfortable betting on Kentucky to cover, but I also don't know if South Carolina is going to win by more than a field goal. So I'm staying away from this one. Vince's drop of the week. The USC Trojans on the road against the Illinois Fighting Illini. After what IU did to Illinois last week, who are the Illini? Who is USC? Look, Vince, we got the same questions about our drops of the week. The Trojans are favored by 6.5 points, but is anyone not wearing USC colors buying that? That is totally fair. All we hear from their camp is about the start time. I would not be surprised which direction this game goes, which is why he's staying away from it. Couldn't agree more, Vince. Could not agree more. It's almost like, and I know this is a crazy thought, it's almost like when you are a program located in California, there might be some inconveniences when you join a conference located in the Midwest. Maybe. I don't know. That could just be me. I also thought it was hilarious when he was like, we went from having the latest possible start time. It's like, look, buddy, you can't go off of Eastern time when you get to kick off at home, but then go off of West Coast time when you kick off away. That's not how that works. You kicked off at 8 p.m. your time, buddy. You're not as smart as you think you are, Lincoln Riley. I know your game. But point being, it's very, very, very inconvenient for either team in that scenario. But that was your choice. That's what you decided to do. So those are the choices that you make. Those are the choices that you make. Wrapping up today's show, our dogs of the week. This one is a little bit scary, but my dog of the week, I'm taking Washington plus 8.5. I talked about this earlier today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Washington hasn't lost at home since November of 2021. Ohio State has played one good team all season, albeit it was Texas, and they were the number one team in the country at the time. But I think we can all agree that Texas hasn't looked like a team that is considered the number one team in the country. It's not a mystery that they continue to drop in the AP poll despite winning every single week outside of the Ohio State game. Just saying. But Ohio State won that game 14-7 at home. But Texas's offense has not looked super great this season. I believe that Washington is the best offense that Ohio State will have faced up to this point. I also think that that road environment is going to be able to keep them in this. It comes down to this. And I'm not saying that Washington is going to win. I picked USC to win earlier today. I just don't think that Washington loses at home by two scores. I don't think you go from being undefeated at home since November 2021 to losing by 2 possessions to a team that is starting a very young quarterback in the most hostile environment that he's going to be playing in, with a team that has question marks around running the football. I think that is a legitimate concern. So my dog of the week is the Washington Huskies plus 8.5 at home against the number one team in the country. That one should be fun. Vince's dog of the week to rebound and improve to 5-1 on the year. He is taking Oklahoma State plus 20.5 against Baylor. When a head coach gets fired, it goes one of two ways. The dumpster fire either continues or the team is energized and they galvanize around the interim head coach. Vince, I love this pick. I'm not even done reading your description, and I love this pick. We watched it happen with Virginia Tech. You know, Vince isn't looking for a remember the Titans moment, but he's just looking for the Cowboys to stay within 3 touchdowns. He thinks that they can do it. Baylor's a good team, but they're not a juggernaut. They're a field goal away from being 1-3 themselves. Vince is a big Cowboys fan this week, and hopefully they can pull one together for Gundy. Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it for me here today on the Spread Option Podcast here on the CFB Nation channel. Now, make sure that you guys are subscribed to this channel, like this video, make sure to share it with anybody that you know just loves talking college football, who likes betting. This isn't a show that's just for bettors. I love sitting down talking ball. This was my first solo show doing this, so it was a little weird hearing myself talk for about 35 minutes. But Vince, can't wait for you to be back soon, man. Hope you rest up. Continue that road to recovery, brother. Hope to see you soon. Hope to see you back on the channel. But we will be back next week at 8 p.m. on Thursday. Can't wait to talk more college football. Can't wait to see how this week turns out. Take it easy. Have a safe weekend, everybody. And see you next time on the CFB Nation channel.